What can replace the church for Christians? Bruce Charlton. For most Christians in recorded history, although not in the Gospels, being a Christian is the same thing as being an observant member of the church. But, of course, the identity of that as it is applied to church, has varied in often incompatible and hostile, even lethal, and frequently evil, ways, since very early in recorded church history. Since the minds of men and, therefore, society have both changed, Christians now choose the church for themselves, and choose which faction within that the which they are to be observant to. However, Christians then typically forget or deny that their own choices are rooted in personal assumptions, and usually pretend, for they are being untruthful, that the church is objectively, and evidentially, the church. So, for men here and now churches cannot be, therefore they are not, what they were. Churches cannot be and cannot provide what they once, often, provided, and especially no church can be regarded as in that way which was natural and spontaneous for so many centuries. What, then, can, or should, replace what the church once used to be? The first answer is nothing. There can be no replacement, because churches are all institutions, and all institutions are changed. All institutions are substantially and motivationally totalitarian bureaucracy assimilated, and have lost their distinctive purposes and the life meanings that flowed from them. Churches are now fundamentally, as well as in practice, this worldly. But perhaps what the church is used to provide can be divided between spiritual and social. If so, the spiritual provision used to be external, mediated by symbolic, language and ritual, quasi-objective, and to be obeyed. This is exactly what has gone, and therefore this cannot be replaced for modern minds. At least, it cannot be replaced effectively and with sufficient motivational power. Churches as spiritual sources are self-subverted, hence relatively ineffectual, and so are church people. Instead, spiritual sustenance needs to come from direct participation with the divine, and all Christians therefore need to become mystics, in a certain sense. All Christians need themselves to communicate with, the divine and the beings of this world. All Christians need to be clear that their ultimate evaluations just are individual, and should work on making these as valid as possible. What of the social aspects of church? The social side of what churches once were cannot be replaced either, because society has transformed in its structures, laws, traditions, evaluations, and so forth. There is no longer an old-style church niche. Furthermore, with people as they now are, social support, inspiration etc. is not, and cannot be, generically prescribed. First, because generic provision is not wanted, not needed, and indeed actively abhorrent. But also because social provision, by whatever is the chosen church, is so scanty, incomplete, crude, intermittent, insufficiently sustaining, and basically unsatisfactory. We are long since at a point, and this can, surely, only increase, where each individual Christian needs to seek for the social support he needs, search for wherever he can find it, in whatever form he can tolerate, and social support provides what he most needs, and in whatever way works best for himself. Although that best is itself almost sure to be both short-term and insufficient. My conclusion is that the model of Christianity based upon the church is either dead and gone, or already feeble, mismatched, and dying. The alternatives to the church are not replacements but substitutes, and all substitutes rely upon an acknowledgement of the validity, as well as the necessity, of individual discernment, choice and validation. As see this as a plain fact, and in my opinion Christians ought to be honest enough to acknowledge plain facts. Bede Griffiths. William Wildblood. Introductory note: this is a slightly revised version of a piece I have previously posted. It seems pertinent in the light of the previous post, serving as an example of what I consider to be a well-meaning but misguided and ultimately failed experiment. Most of the time during our years in Yercaud not much happened. The idea was to lead a quiet life of meditation and spiritual focus in a suitable environment without disturbance or distraction. I have nothing to write about these times, the bulk of my life there, but they were the most important part. Sometimes, though, we went traveling, and I might mention here a visit we made to the ashram of Bede Griffiths, the Christian monk who had adopted the lifestyle of a Hindu sannyasi. Michael and Bede Griffiths had a mutual acquaintance who had given us a letter of introduction, and so one time when we were traveling in the vicinity of his ashram, we decided to pay him a visit. By one of those little quirks of fate which you might take to mean that someone on the other side has a sense of humor, it transpired that Bede Griffiths had that very day gone to Yercaud for the funeral of a fellow Catholic priest. However, he was expected back the next day, and the people at the ashram kindly said we could stay there. I recall that the bed we were offered was basically a slab of concrete jutting out from the wall, resembling a shelf you might put pots and pans on more than something you would want to sleep on. Still, you don't go to ashrams for the creature comforts. The site itself was idyllically situated on the banks of the sacred river Cauvery, the Tamil equivalent of the Ganges, and though the life led by the devotees there was simple to the point of austerity, the natural beauty of the place more than compensated. Father Bede came back the next day. With his long white hair and beard, barefoot and simply dressed in an ochre robe, he looked every inch the holy man. We talked to him for an hour or so, and it was clear that his appearance was a true representation of what he was, which is by no means always the case. He had been a pupil and friend of C.S. Lewis, and we spoke a bit about that. He was very friendly and happy to talk. When we told him we had lived for a while at Whitefield, he asked us what we thought of Sai Baba. At best, a false prophet was my diplomatic response. Father Bede was less condemnatory, but thought confusion arose when Indians did not sufficiently distinguish between their mythologies and their philosophy. Perhaps he was being diplomatic too. A person with a beard and a white beard description automatically generated. I liked Father Bede, but I did have some reservations about his ashram and the form it took. The church was built along the lines of a southern Indian temple with statues of Jesus and Mary in the form of Hindu deities, which made it look like something out of an Indian Disneyland. We went to a service which was half mass and half puja, and, although conducted with obvious sincerity, seemed to me to be fundamentally misconceived. When you mix the outer elements of religious traditions, you end up with a hybrid that may preserve something of the externals of both but has nothing of the inner nature of either. Truth may be beyond form, but form can express or misrepresent truth, and if you try to blend traditions that have grown completely separately, you lose most of what matters and are just left with a caricature of both. It is true that religions have borrowed from each other, and that, for example, the now unmistakably Eastern form of the Buddha owes much to Greek influence, but when a religious iconography and ritual has taken on a settled and defined form, to mix it up with that from another tradition negates its whole purpose, which is to act as a channel from the inner to the outer. I am not saying that religions cannot learn from one another, but to seek to combine their outer trappings and forms of worship robs them of their operative value and results in a maybe well-intentioned but effectively confused mishmash, all style no substance. The mystical elements of the various religions may be reaching for the same inner truths, though they may not. See this post, but you cannot mix and match the externals, and to see a picture of Christ sitting like Shiva seems blasphemous to me. I understand that Father Bede himself was aware of the dangers of syncretism, and I mean no disrespect to his person in writing of my impression of his ashram like this. He was born in a time when religions were very exclusive, and it is understandable that, as a mystic, he sought to move beyond that, but I think the approach tried at his ashram was a mistaken one, even if it was well-meaning and sincere. My visit to Father Bede's ashram was nearly 40 years ago, and it may be completely different today, but that's not the issue. My point here is that the all religions are one attitude, popular during the 20th century, doesn't really work. Because there is nothing hidden anymore and we appear to have easy access to everything that has ever existed, it is tempting to blend traditions and think we are getting the best of all worlds. But greater breadth often means less depth. I do think we can learn from other traditions, and one of the advantages of living at the present time is that we have that possibility. But if you blend the outer forms of traditions that have sprung from totally different revelations, you will lose the connection they both might have had to the source of all. When I visited Father Bede, I was more persuaded of the idea that all religions express the same truth than I am now. Today, we can see that God is conceived very differently in some religions compared to others, and the desired heavenly destination is not the same in all cases either. Obviously, there are strong similarities. The mystics of every religion do have much in common, and the moral codes are largely identical, but we live in a world which is increasingly dominated by spiritual evil, and it seems clear to me that only Christ has the power to stand up to that evil. I wonder that if Father Bede was still alive, whether he might reassess the wisdom of blending Hindu and Christian iconography at his ashram. His friend and mentor C.S. Lewis certainly regarded the two religions as very different. That doesn't mean there are not many points of contact, but there is something unique about Christ that does not exist in Hinduism, even in the figure of Krishna, who may be similar in some respects but is utterly different in many that count. Christianity remade as a religion of power, or of escape. Bruce Charlton. It often seems that there have never been very many Christians in the world, because so very few people, even among the religious, seem even to want what Jesus offered, a resurrected eternal life in heaven, attainable by following him. What the mass of religious people want most, is apparently a deity of power. God/S, whose own power is so great and irresistible, that service to the God/S can guarantee that those who serve him/them will win, eventually. Naturally, when such people call themselves Christian, they make Christianity into an instrument of power, serving a God defined in terms of power in this mortal life and world. An influential minority find winning to be no more than a temporary palliative, because these people are irresistibly aware that evil pervades all men, winners as well as losers, and because disease, degeneration and death make our mortal life a tragedy. What such people desire most deeply is escape from the tragedy that is mortal life on earth. Naturally, when such people call themselves Christian, they make Christianity into a religion of escape, a religion of palliation in this temporary and illusory mortal life and world, escape into complete absence of all suffering, perhaps bliss, in the next, and real, world. It is natural, and probably inevitable, that people will make their religion into a vehicle of what they most want, but it is confusing for those who instead want what Jesus offered. When the overwhelming mass of Christianity actually is about power, and its advanced practitioners primarily desire escape, and when power or escape fill most of Christian discourse, it becomes difficult, or perhaps in practice impossible, for someone who innately wants what Jesus actually offers to recognize Christianity as the place he can find what he desires. This is why I think we are compelled to seek fundamental knowledge concerning our deepest wants in a manner that is direct and personal, intuitive and simple. If we do not, or cannot, find the necessary knowledge for ourselves and validate it by ourselves, in faith that the true deity will guide the sincere searcher sufficiently for the purpose, then I see zero possibility of actually finding Jesus' offer by a process of sifting through the colossal and growing archives of public religious discourse. Note added, the above analysis suggests why Christianity has declined, and is declining. If you are religious, and it is power you really want in the 21st century, then Christianity is not the place that somebody would seek a share of power. The obvious power religions are not in Christianity, but in the plainly monotheistic world religions. Affiliation with power might be sought by supporting or converting to the global monotheism which has been growing so rapidly in zeal, numbers, and nations over the past century. Or else a power seeker might seek affiliation with to the global racial monotheism that has such a disproportionately large share of world power, wealth, and influence. As for religions of escape, a much purer and simpler and more escape-orientated religion than Christianity can be found among the Western philosophical and theosophy-derived, perennialist versions of Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism. And, overlapping with these, there is a large, growing, and socially acceptable, establishment-supported, oneness spirituality of the New Age. In sum, both for those who seek power, and those who seek escape, there are more straightforward and effective alternatives to be found out with Christianity. Whatever happened to real science? Bruce Charlton. The activity of mainstream modern big science is most reminiscent of a Soviet Union-era organization, such as the grossly unprofitable Polish glass factory I saw on TV being inspected by John Harvey Jones in his TV show Troubleshooter. The factory was producing vast quantities of defective drinking glasses which nobody wanted. Nobody wanted to buy them nor even to use them. So the glasses were simply piling up in gigantic stacks around the factory building, using up resources, getting in everybody's way, and taking up all the useful space. When Harvey Jones was asked what to do, how to make the business profitable, he said the first essential step was stop making the glasses. Stop now, this very minute, he said. Go out of this office and switch off the production line, send all the factory workers home, on full pay, for a few weeks, and begin sorting it out. But so long as the workers were attending daily, beavering away, filling in paperwork, with raw materials pouring in on thundering lorries, the masses of defective glasses were being churned out, stacked until they were blocking the aisles and preventing anything useful being done. There was no hope. Better to pay people for doing nothing than this. Same with professional science, stop it now, for goodness sake. Switch off the assembly line, please. Stop wasting vast human and physical resources in piling up useless stuff that nobody wants. Better to pay researchers to do nothing than this. Obviously it would be better if people did something useful than nothing, so maybe ex-professional researchers could be dressed warmly and paid to lie across the threshold of closed doors to function as draft excluders. So, here we have the problem of professional science today. It has been bloated by decades of exponential growth into a bureaucratically dominated heavy industry Soviet factory, characterized by vastly inefficient mass production of shoddy goods that nobody wants. And professional science is trundling along, hour by hour, day by day, masses of people going to work, doing things, saying things, writing things, getting funding, spending money, advertising themselves, engaging in petty gossip, intrigues and backstabbing. Science is hopelessly and utterly unreformable while it continues to be so big, continues to grow, and continues uselessly to churn out ever more of its substandard and unwanted goods. Switch it off, stop making the defective glasses, now. Note, the above is a chapter from my 2012 book Not Even Trying, The Corruption of Real Science. I stumbled across this yesterday, and it made me laugh, so I thought it worth sharing for new readers of this blog, and the many, who neither read nor will read the book. Is Substack corrupting? Bruce Charlton. Is Substack corrupting? Corrupting towards psycho-spiritual assimilation into, and support of, the global totalitarian materialist ideology. yes, it does seem to be. And the reason is obvious: Substack exists and is configured to extract payment, and, as of 2026, in this world as is, it was not always thus. Writing for money, even desultory sum of money that most subtackers collect, is corrupting. The economy is corrupt, already, and ever more so. Most Substack outputs are very obviously money-collecting operations, for example those by ex-journalists, those with clickbait extracts, pay up if you want to read more, and evident readership pandering, that increases the longer the Substack continues. When I say that Substack is corrupting, then I mean that is its tendency. It tends to draw people into the mindset of writing for money. I don't mean that all Substackers yield to the temptation. I don't mean, either, that the corruption is irresistible. I mean that is its tendency, a toehold of instrumentality is yielded, and that mental colonization usually seems to expand. We live in an age when the amateur, the non-professional, the not career, is best. Of course, we must make a living. I am just suggesting that if you are serious about your writing, about what you write, what you think, then it is very much preferable not to make your serious writing the means of making a living. Or else to separate your making a living type of writing, from that writing where you really are doing your very best. Someone doing his very best with his writing, best by the highest standards he knows, someone for whom the writing is a significant spiritual activity, does not make reading that writing contingent upon paying, or even psychologically associated with paying to read it, not if he can help it. Plus, of course Substack is not unique in its tendency to corrupt, and the criticisms that follow are intended to apply wherever applicable. But Ashe has been the platform in my corner of the internet for the past several years, after the mass sackings of journalists began, and more widely since the lockdown era. It is wanting money from the writing that is corrupting, not the amount actually received, not the success of the money-making operation. Note added, for context, as well as being a professional medical journal editor for about 7 years, I wrote quite a bit of freelance paid journalism from the late 1980s and for more than a decade, fairly regularly for New Scientist, The Times of London, Times Higher Education Supplement, and various commercial medical magazines, and odd pieces for The Independent and once for The Guardian. Positive greatness is non-transmissible. Religions, ideologies, systems are useless when it comes to yielding good consequences. Bruce Charlton. I find it recurrently very striking that although I may admire, study, reflect upon individual persons, my mentors, my strongly positive feelings about such people almost never extend beyond that specific person, almost never includes even their close associates, disciples, heirs. And almost never include the religion, ideology or, generically, the system that the admired individuals propagate. Negative harm and evil can indeed be encouraged and propagated, as we see all around us, but this does not seem to apply to the positive and good. In one sense this is obvious and to be expected, and yet it is not what most people, including myself, tend to assume. On the contrary, we assume that there is something transmissible about positive goodness and greatness, that the idea of a great and good man will tend to promote greatness, that the associates, disciples, followers, heirs of a great and good man will share, or at least significantly encourage, the same positive greatness. Again and again I find that the great and good man's positive greatness may be real and strong, and yet the people associated are either mediocre and ineffectual, or else overall malign, and negative in their nature and tendency. Furthermore, and something harder to grasp, the great and good man's own account of what is necessary, and desirable for goodness and positive change is also wrong. The great and good man's religion/ideology/system of understanding and explanation, his system for working to generate positive change, also shares this quality of being, in actual practice, ineffectual and useless at best, but often and with apparent ease readily made into a mechanism for the pursuit of evil. The people who are supposed to continue the work of the great and good man do not do so. They either degenerate into a relatively harmless but ultimately useless for good pastime/hobby/club/lifestyle choice. Or else they become actually negative and harmful in their intent and outcomes, a vehicle for the pursuit, whether directly, or by lending support, of evil ends. Examples of the futility and/or malignity of systems associated with those I regard as my mentors and great and positive persons abound. Indeed, it is exceptions that are hard to find. Most significantly, I have come to believe that this is true even of that greatest of men, Jesus Christ. With the single exception of the author of the fourth Gospel, I do not find the same greatness in any of those who were associated with Jesus, or who propagated what they believed to be the system that Jesus seemed to be recommending/commanding. And I find the usual mixture of ineffectuality and tool for net malignity in the systems attributed to Jesus, and allegedly associated with Jesus. What does this mean? The conclusion would seem to be that institution and system are intrinsically useless at best, but actually net harmful in practice. Perhaps we can only get benefit by direct inner contact with the spirit of the great and good man himself, because we ourselves are unlikely to do good by attempting to propagate this greatness. When it comes to the good and the positive in this life, maybe we can actually do little more than point at a great and good man, with a personal recommendation, and maybe also give an account of our own experience of such contact. Some of these recent mentors who are writers, who have had a positive impact, as I judge, and who I have often blogged about are S.D. Coleridge, Rudolf Steiner, Dion Fortune, J.R.R. Tolkien, Owen Barfield, William Arkell, Gareth Knight. Several of these taught a system, and all of these came to seem wrong and net harmful. They had associates, followers, disciples etc., and unless the individuals were independently great and good themselves, such persons have always proved disappointing, exerted a net negative influence, and often, I judge, were/are of bad intent. With regards to Tolkien and Barfield, see the comment by Anteb, and my reply. It should be noted that a great and good man may have other great and good men in his circle, but their greatness is, essentially, independently achieved rather than derivative. For instance, and contrary to what he himself asserted and probably believed, Barfield's greatness was essentially independent from that of Steiner. Great and good men are not reliable witnesses when it comes to their own special qualities. The Day I Didn't Meet Geoffrey Ashe. William Wildblood. I first read some of Geoffrey Ashe's Arthurian books in the early days of my spiritual researching. They were not exactly spiritual books, but there was an overlap, because the Arthurian mythos taps into a deep level of the psyche where imagination, legend and spiritual exploration all meet up and feed off each other. The Arthurian stories are an entrance into a world of myth and magic, part pagan but with a strong Christian underpinning. The connection with Atlantis cannot be ignored either. Merlin and the Lady of the Lake both have a relationship with that drowned world which reached great spiritual heights before collapsing in hubris and wickedness. I had long loved the Arthurian tales as any right-minded person from the British Isles or its diaspora should do. I was introduced to them through a vividly illustrated children's version with medieval knights fighting each other before courting beautiful maidens, and then gravitated to the Roger Lancelin Green version, which is a classic of its kind. Thus, when I encountered Geoffrey Ashe's work which tried to put it all in historical context, I was interested to learn what he had discovered about the period. Then I went to India and my interests shifted direction. But when I returned to England I lived for a while in Sherborne in Dorset, and that is only 6 miles from Cadbury Castle, the Iron Age hill fort that some identify as the site of Camelot. I visited Cadbury and let my imagination wander, and thenceforth I was reconnected with the Arthurian world. I had been to Glastonbury a couple of times in the 70s, but in 1987 I went for another visit. I visited the Tor, which has never really spoken to me, Chalice Well which has, and the Abbey which does most of all. Then I went to a tea shop, that bastion of Englishness which has now almost disappeared, for a cup of tea and a slice of homemade cake before wandering up the high street and into a bookshop for a browse in the richly stocked, it was Glastonbury, metaphysical section. I had my nose deep in some tome which, oddly enough, I remember as a Gareth Knight book, when what seemed to me to be a rather elderly man came in and began browsing next to me. He saw what I was looking at and said, "Ah, yes, that's good," or words to that effect, and I nodded my appreciation. He then moved over to the cash desk to buy a couple of books. The cashier addressed him as Geoffrey and he departed. When I bought my book I somehow knew that this person was somebody, so I asked the cashier who he was. "That was Geoffrey Ashe," he said. I didn't regret not talking to him some more. First of all, I had nothing to say, and secondly it must be annoying to be buttonholed by strangers. But I was intrigued that someone like Geoffrey Ashe would still be buying books like an ordinary person. I know that's ridiculous. Writers are first and foremost readers, but it was somehow reassuring to know that a proper author would still behave like the humble folk and retain the same passions and enthusiasms. He was only in his mid-60s then, but seemed older to my relatively youthful self. Some might call this a missed opportunity, but I saw it as a chance encounter made more interesting by its sheer everydayness. Dead goggles, social spectacles, and the animistic/anthropomorphic worldview. Bruce Charlton. The animistic worldview is a consequence of the evolved nature of human intelligence. Human intelligence is substantially social intelligence, a set of psychological adaptations which evolved as an adaptation to the problems of social living. Humans see the world through social spectacles. Consequently, hunter-gatherers, and children, spontaneously anthropomorphize the natural world. Thus I wrote in 2002, and in other pieces around the millennium. Back then, I was writing from the assumptions of science generally, and biological in particular, and was, and for another half-decade or so, metaphysically an atheist materialist. In other words, I assumed reality was the world described by science, and, more importantly, by bureaucracy, the mass media, law and all the other mandatory enforced social institutions. And also the same world is assumed by religion, including Christianity in its churches, in all its public and regarded as essential manifestations. Yes. The Christian churches, Christian people, all assume the same abstract models of reality as do science and government, because they believe that most of the world is dead, or rather unalive, and ultimate reality is divided into and consists of abstractions such as time and infinity. They assume that physics, and mathematics, describes ultimate reality, to which life, consciousness, humanity are added on sometime later. Indeed, it has long been the contention of sophisticated Christian theologians that God is dead, in effect. Dead either because God can only be described negatively, by what God is not, or because God is only knowable in terms of attributes described in terms of philosophical abstractions. To circle back to my metaphor that humans see the world through social spectacles, it is evident that my social interpretation of reality was then being regarded as due to a focusing and filtering scheme that was interposed between a dead reality and the livingness of human beings. Now I have an opposite metaphysics. I assume that creation, and God, consists of beings in relationships. Reality is anthropomorphic. The social spectacles were not so much installed into us by natural selection, nor helpfully provided even by God, as being our innate and primordial knowledge of the nature of reality. Not spectacles at all, but a proper apprehension of truth. And it is life-filtering dead goggles that get installed onto us in childhood, dead goggles that interpose an unnatural, abstract, mediated and modeled, conceptualization of reality. It is dead goggles that generate modernity and modern men, obscuring our innate, spontaneous, and natural apprehension of the living beings and purposive nature of this divine creation we inhabit. The important, vital insight that inevitable does not mean good. Bruce Charlton. One of the deepest and, it seems to me, most important insights from Jesus, is that what is inevitable in this mortal life, is not for that reason good. Many things in this life may be unavoidable, including our own natures, work, and taxes, but also many others, and therefore we should make the best of them, but these same things may nonetheless be evils, or indeed sins. My impression is that few people are prepared to acknowledge this reality, and instead they tend to assume that that which is unavoidable, or that which has always been an aspect of life throughout known history, are therefore either positively good, or else neutral. Yet this point seems to be fundamental to Christianity, at least, as I understand Christianity, because if it were otherwise, then there would be no necessity for salvation, and Jesus would be optional at best. Or, to say the same thing in an opposite way, Jesus is necessary and our hope lies in salvation exactly because much that is universal, pervasive, inescapable in our own, or any other, mortal life is fundamentally wrong and or adverse. In a word, mortal life does not, cannot, and never shall, suffice. And this is why salvation, with resurrection into heaven coming after this mortal life, is the only true hope. This divine creation, the primary creation of this mortal life, world, universe, is not good enough. The opportunity to follow Jesus is needed if we want better, and the second creation of heaven is our only genuine possibility of attaining that better life and world. Anything AI can do, is, fundamentally, not worth doing or better not done, a potentially valuable lesson of this litmus test. Bruce Charlton. One thing about the litmus tests of our era is that they are learning opportunities, but more emphatically they are opportunities to learn something important and especially relevant to ourselves and this era of human history. This is because the very success of litmus test issues, the large degree of, often passionate, public support they attract, makes it evident that the tasks of recognizing their fundamentally evil falseness is one of especially great value. Even when we personally happen to be largely immune to the appeal of a specific test, we can learn valuable lessons from considering the nature of their appeal, from considering what particular, maybe distinctive, modern weakness they are probing and exploiting. The current dominating litmus test is probably the post-November 2022 AI project, and the lesson comes from observing and analyzing the nature of its appeal, from studying what it is about AI that AI advocates focus upon or enthuse about, including both its actual capabilities, claims of capabilities, and hoped for effects and consequences. Each of these have different causes, but I have noticed that when it comes to the actual capabilities of post-2022 AI, it is apparent that whatever AI can do, ought not to be done. Either because it is not worth doing, which covers a good deal, or because it is actively harmful to the human spirit that this task be automated. To recognize this requires that we be able to detach ourselves from the here and now worldly imperatives, such as making a living while dwelling in a totalitarian system that has, increasingly strongly, net evil aims, values, and methods. If this can be achieved, then we notice that AI is actually being used for anti-loving and anti-creative purposes. And for a Christian, anti-loving and anti-creative means evil, it means an opposition to the nature of divine creation. I mean that AI systems are being used to reduce and, ideally, eliminate human to human, and therefore any potential for genuine interpersonal relationships. Instead we get automated simulation. And AI is being used to reduce and, ideally, eliminate from tasks any potential for genuine human creativity. Instead we get automated simulation. This is the actual effect of actually existing AI systems. And on the flip side there is the situation that anything AI genuinely does do, which is not a simulation, should not be done. This insight can be helpful because there are many aspects of modern life that are, whether in practice, or fundamentally, unavoidable and pervasive, but which we should spiritually recognize as intrinsically ungood, evil. As so often, it is the clear spiritual recognition of a reality that is necessary, and that is the proper task of a Christian, and not our personal ability practically to eliminate that which is a necessity. Because, often there is nothing we can do to alleviate an evil necessity. But we can always recognize and acknowledge that a necessity is evil, and that is our proper task. The concentration camp guard argument. Bruce Charlton. In relation to today's earlier posts, the following may help concretize and clarify the nature of the argument. It picks up on the pub discussion about whether you or I would refuse to work as a guard in a concentration camp. The concentration camp guard argument is usually framed as a matter of principles and courage. First, whether you or I would recognize the moral principles we currently uphold despite living in a society that propagated the opposite, and secondly, whether we would then have the courage to resist coercive social pressure and refuse to do something that we regarded as evil. Leaving aside the observation that of course the person raising the concentration camp guard argument would go along with social majority opinion, and would not resist even the mildest of social coercion, but would instead enthusiastically embrace and pursue a new career, in what would probably be reframed as public protection and offender rehabilitation. This, because such is what that kind of person, i.e. people who raise moral dilemma questions of the concentration camp guard type, invariably actually does. For example, as was / is seen in every Litmus Test issue, but especially the Birdemic Peck business of 2020. But leaving aside such practical and behavioral considerations, and acknowledging that extremely few people can, or perhaps should, resist extreme social coercion, especially when, as usual, these include sanctions against family and dependents. The proper question would not link recognition of true moral values with the capacity to act upon them. By linking principles to the need for courageous action, all that we do is to ensure people will modify their principles in order to accommodate the strength of their moral courage. As St. Paul bitterly complained, there will always be dissonance between a man's moral principles and his moral behavior. That is inescapable, because the nature of human beings and mortal life on earth. But it is wicked to seek consistency by adjusting our principles to the reality of our actions. What can and should be required of a moral person is simply that he recognize and affirm true principles, that he acknowledge what is evil, and inwardly reject it. That recognition, acknowledgement, inner rejection is what is necessary, and that is what is always possible. This is what Christians term repentance. So, no matter what their own behavior, or career choices, or social compulsions may be, people should always be able to know that, for instance, concentration camps are evil, and that personally profiting from such an evil is wrong. The End of Two-Step Self-Interest. Bruce Charlton. The old left in Britain was largely rooted in the self-interest of unionized skilled workers, who strove to protect their pay and conditions over the medium to long term. It was accepted that, in the short term, workers would lose out. By union activity they would become less popular with employers, need to pay union dues, attend meetings, maybe embark on self-education, and if there were strikes they would lose wages. My point is that at this time, from the 1800s right up into the middle 1900s, ordinary people were thinking in the medium to long term, on a timescale that encompassed years ahead. That is what was going on with the rioting and resistance of groups that resisted technological changes that would tend to destroy their long-term interests, groups now generically described as Luddites, handloom weavers, for example. Workers would be aware of changes in laws and regulations that constituted structural threats to their future power and autonomy, and these would often be the focus of industrial disputes. Let's call this two-step self-interest. But we now, and increasingly over the past half-century, inhabit an era of one-step self-interest. The concern is with me, here, now. Proposed change to our work and life is evaluated on the basis of what may benefit me today, tomorrow, next week, maybe next year. This is part of the change from an old leftism based around class, economics, and power, to a new leftism based around lifestyle, personal identity, social status, self-esteem, etc. New leftism is a top-down ruling class project. It does not seriously seek support among working-class unionized workers, but instead among the managerial and intellectual workers, among youth, and youth-minded, who value being cool, and by pandering to an expanding client class of disaffected self-conceptualized victims. New leftism has coincided with and also abolished two-step reasoning from all public discourse. The pursuit of basic self-interest is nowadays regarded as despicable, except among the designated victim class, who must accept subservient status and live by grace and favor of the system to retain this contingent privilege. There is simply no place in mainstream societal and professional public discourse for considering the medium/long-term consequences of changes. Consequently, or from some other cause, people have actually become incapable of two-step reasoning, of evaluating their own two-step self-interest. They can, and do, look no further ahead of more widely than me/here/now, and become very uncomfortable or angry when anyone tries to make them consider the medium-long-term consequences of proposed change. All that people ask, all that they can conceptualize, is that proposed change be approved officially or by their chosen authority, and have some superficially plausible chance of yielding one-step self-interest, better conditions or pay, perceived chance of promotion, higher status among peers, etc. When there are two-step strategizers are leading those who are blind to consequences, what happens is that multiple short-term, one-step, benefits, will accumulate towards long-term, two-step, annihilation. It happens unwittingly, without awareness on the part of those being manipulated towards their own destruction. That some proposed or actual change may abolish their job, impoverish them, create environmental threats, lead to war, international or civil, is simply out with the scope of their reasoning. What was the normal common-sense reasoning of ordinary working men just 100 years ago, i.e. the ability to evaluate longer-term and structural consequences from their own point of view, now seems like merely arbitrary, or actively irresponsible, speculation. Irrelevant at best, but mostly negativistic, subversive, dangerous to organizational cohesion. As a result of this cognitive deficiency, whole functional institutions, such as my personal areas of experience and interest such as academia, scientific research, medicine, and the Christian churches, have been taken over in an incremental, stepwise fashion, and brought under external bureaucratic control. And, at least since the 1990s, all this happened essentially any significant awareness, opposition or resistance. I am not calling here for a restoration of two-step self-interest. This is apparently impossible, people are just incapable. Neither am I suggesting that it always or even usually led to long-term betterment. Luddites failed in their resistance. I am instead describing what happened, what used to be, a way of thinking and reasoning that was possible, almost automatic, for ordinary working people for many generations. And how it has almost disappeared. The livelihood of whole sectors of the population in, say, 1800, might be, often was, abolished, and the world was changed. But this did not happen without people being able to work out in advance what was on the cards, and without recognizing the cause of what was happening to them. Nowadays, the mass of UK people are literally too stupefied even to work out such simple two-step self-interested logic that immigration at a rate of 800k plus per year is the cause of housing shortages. Or to know the inevitable long-term consequence of decades of severe native sub-fertility plus mass immigration. The nature of this stupidity has nothing to do with relative intelligence, because it is commonest among the intellectual classes. Neither is it explicable merely on the basis of propaganda, because the olden days workers were subject to a very complete mind control system via establishment religion, and very harsh punishments for transgression. But this regime could not eradicate people's ability to know their own long-term self-interest, even when they could not effectively defend it. The cause of this modern incapacity of reasoning seems to me more like a loss of basic protective instincts, perhaps at a biological, genetic level. But loss is loss, and this is a very real fact of life, something that must be taken into account, worked around. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And in a world of where most are capable of only one-step self-interest, the two-steppers will rule. The two-steppers will easily manipulate the one-steppers without their awareness, and without resistance. And that is the world we inhabit. Loss of the motivational primacy of the religious, spiritual perspective is also crucial. I believe that past people were able to favor the medium/long term because they genuinely expected to live after death. Once self-interest is confined to our own mortal life, then it tends to become shorter term, because the closer and more personal the benefit hoped for, the surer and more certain it is that we personally will get it. Note, and this is yet another reason why there is no hope from the Christian churches. The churches are being strategized into annihilation. Churches consist of, and are led by, one-steppers, who are unwittingly manipulated, by one short-term beneficial increment after another, by a ruling class headed, ultimately, by two-steppers. Note added, the above is an example of why common sense has not just zero traction nowadays, but is actively stigmatized, and why, as I analyzed in my 2011 mini-book Thought Prison, see sidebar, there cannot be a genuine, i.e. not spook-generated/manipulated fake opposition, and effective political party based on common sense. CS just does not motivate sufficiently in the modern atheistic materialistic mind, probably never has. This has been repeatedly confirmed in the 15 years since, when high-profile pseudo-common-sense politics always turns out to be a sham, as with the current leader of the free world, and the Brexiteers of the UK. Leftist Western supporters of bureaucratic totalitarianism, knowledge workers, are one-step dupes of the agents of chaos. Bruce Charlton. Just an observation. It is striking that the leftist Westerners who support the ideals of bureaucratic totalitarianism, I mean mostly those knowledge workers of the managerial, state official, and intellectual worker class, are operating in a bubble of inverted misconception. These folk are passionately committed to institutions such as the UN, WHO, EU, the left political parties, environmentalist and other charity NGOs with ideals such as diversity and equality. They see themselves as wanting a compassionate and fair society, with utilitarian aims, operated on rational grounds by technical and professional experts, such as themselves. Yet they actively support, admire, pin their hopes on the agents of chaos, the top leadership class who now control the UN, EU and all the other agencies and groups to whom the Western totalitarians affiliate. And the Western knowledge worker class viscerally oppose the global representative of exactly that kind of utilitarian, bureaucratic, legalistic totalitarianism which they so much admire. Especially fearing and hating the Fire Nation to the east of Europe, and the Earth Kingdom of the Far East, nations that are, overall, striving to retain and restore a version of the late 20th century system of international law and relative toleration between the nation powers. My interest in this phenomenon is that almost all of the Western knowledge worker class, for example lawyers, academics, religious leaders, teachers, scientists and the multitude of bureaucrats and managers, i.e. those who are, in principle, the most intelligent and well-informed of the masses, have been duped into solidly, stubbornly, supporting exactly that ideology of mutually destructive chaos which aims to wipe out the entire utilitarian totalitarian project, starting with its most powerful national advocates. The Western knowledge workers therefore diligently sustain and serve the agenda of those who strategize to destroy everything they most cherish. In a nutshell, the Western supporters of lawful evil oppose the not Western supporters of lawful evil, while vehemently actively promoting and sustaining the Western agents of chaotic evil. I find this fascinating, as a psycho-social phenomenon. I mean, the way that such a large group of people can be so thoroughly brainwashed to work so hard against their own interests. It is a telling example of the domination of one-step self-interested reasoning I discussed yesterday. It is exactly because the Western knowledge workers are so enthralled to one-step reasoning, that they are so pathetically, and indeed despicably, vulnerable to such gross manipulation. Plus, the situation somewhat resembles that described for Saruman and the Uruk-hai in The Lord of the Rings. Saruman represents the Western agents of chaos in the leadership class of the West, and the Western knowledge workers are the Uruk-hai. The Uruk-hai are presented as law-abiding orc-men, hybrids specifically bred by Saruman, who are loyally devoted and obedient to Saruman, who himself spouts a cynically dishonest rhetoric of fairness, control, order. Which cynical rhetoric is taken at face value and believed in by the Uruk-hai. Meanwhile, Saruman has become a petty, sadistic, spitefully destructive individual, whose overmastering motivation is increasingly rooted in resentment and fear, and whose primary desire is vengefully to torment and kill his grudge enemies. Thus the lawful evil of the hard-working and conscientious Uruk-hai/Western knowledge workers are set to work on a campaign of chaos. The same applies mutatis mutandis to, almost, whole nations, such as the entity I have termed Choam, word search it, whose people, it seems to be a large majority of them, are being willingly, indeed enthusiastically, led towards their own descent into chaos and annihilation, under the deceptive rhetoric of their rulers' pretense to be pursuing increased national power and system expansion/consolidation. Note, I am presenting this as an observation, and not intending that it be interpreted as a prescription for how the supporters of bureaucratic evil ought more effectively to pursue their self-interest. I do not wish to support either of the main strategies of evil, neither totalitarian or chaotic. But I believe that we can only avoid being drawn into supporting one or the other species of evil, by understanding the actual situation, including its willfully self-blinded and delusional nature. The esoteric occult focus, from Far East, through Middle East, to Celtic. Bruce Charlton. The occult revival in the West, especially the UK, spreading to Europe and the USA, began with Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society in the late 1800s, which led to the Golden Dawn magical societies. This regarded the fount of secret wisdom and magical power to lie in the far east of India, China, Japan, but especially India in the early 20th century. Theosophy also gave a structural emphasis to the Kabbalah/Kabbalah, with its Hebrew origins in the Middle East, and a fascination with ancient Egypt. The favored religions were Hinduism, and later Buddhism and Islamic, Sufism, with a selective and much subordinate interest in mystical Christianity from the Neoplatonic tradition. A uniting feature was belief in progressive reincarnation towards deity. The second phase, which regarded itself as Western, is most associated with Rudolf Steiner and later Dion Fortune, and was most active in the early decades, but especially the era between World War I and World War II. But their idea of the West was relative. They discarded the Far East focus, but retained a basis in the Kabbalah, instead were interested by Egypt and the Middle East of Palestine. Steiner was much interested by the specifics of native European folk souls, but anthroposophy never developed an explicit magical practice, nor was it regional in practice or aspiration, being much focused on the power center of the HQ in Dornach, Switzerland. This era of magic is Christian, or at least pro-Christian, depending on interpretation. At any rate, many of them, including Steiner and Dion Fortune, regarded themselves as strongly Christian in essence. However, progressive reincarnation, rather than salvation and resurrection, remained at its heart. From the post-World War II era, for example, Robert Graves's The White Goddess, but especially from the 1960s and 1970s, the magical tradition began to focus on genuinely Western sources, and especially on the supposed Celtic aspects of Britain and Ireland before the Roman conquest. This led to the various manifestations of neo-paganism, such as extremely popular witches/Wiccans, Druids, and the modern magical societies and groups, including much of the broad chaos magic tradition. Modern occultism and esoteric activity has retained the idea of progressive reincarnation towards divinity. However, in contrast with the early 20th century occultism of Steiner and Dion Fortune, post-millennial occultism is, and increasingly, essentially anti-Christian/anything but Christianity, usually actively and vehemently so. Indeed, 21st century occultism typically embraces the Christianity-inverted values of mainstream Western culture, especially with respect to morality, which among neo-pagans is often explicitly and deliberately transgressional in its ideals and actuality. A survival guide is now published. William Wildblood. A survival guide to the end times was published in the UK yesterday, August 4th in the US, and you can now look inside on the Amazon website and see some of its contents. It's a simple title which plainly describes what the book is about, but it does raise a couple of questions. What are the end times, and how do you survive them? To address the second part of that double question first, survival is preservation, and what you need to preserve is the integrity of your soul, because, when it comes down to it, that is all you have. That is what survives physical death, and so you need to make sure it is in the best possible condition for what comes after. Surviving the end times is not about preserving the body in the face of collapse. Bodily survival can only ever be temporary. The only true survival is spiritual. The reality is that the end times threaten your soul. They do so because all the prevailing tendencies are anti-spiritual. Look around you. Is that not the case now? This is one way we can tell we are in such times, and every day the situation degrades further. On the other hand, on the individual level I believe many people are beginning to wake up, no doubt due to the deteriorating world situation, but when you do start to wake up and see your world crumbling about you, what do? You can fight against the loss through political action, but part of the end times scenario is that all outer things including institutions and even modes of action are corrupted. Political action may bring temporary reprieve here and there, but it cannot bring real improvement in the sense of turning things round any more than medicine can cure a dying man. This doesn't mean one should do nothing, just as the fact someone is dying doesn't mean you shouldn't try to help them, but you have to be realistic. The world cannot stand against the end times. The word end is not there for nothing. This brings us to what the end times might be and why many people believe them to be now. One of the simplest ways to conceive of them is as an example of entropy. Left to themselves, established systems run down and will naturally revert to chaos and disorder. This can be circumvented by intervention, but there comes a point at which the forces of decay are too strong and will outrun any attempt to correct them. Dissolution increases and then gathers speed. Another way to understand the end times is as the last phase in a cycle, and for this you have to understand the reality of how our world exists. It is the expression of spirit in matter. These are the two forces or modes of being that correspond to consciousness, and that in which life externalizes itself for the purposes of self-revelation, essence and substance we might say. At the beginning of a cycle, the spirit aspect dominates, but as the cycle unfolds, spirit recedes and the material aspect comes to the fore. Spirit never withdraws completely, or all life would depart and matter return to its prime condition of formless chaos. But awareness of spirit is diminished by the greater involvement of consciousness in matter, as well as the phenomenon of matter itself becoming more material, meaning more opaque to spirit. The fact that over the last 100+ years the culture has become one of atheistic materialism, is another strong indication that we live in the end times. Spirit is inaccessible for most people, and it requires great effort to be aware of it other than as an intellectual possibility. To survive the end times you must actively resist the flow of life as it is now. You must stand apart from prevailing attitudes and behaviors and position yourself in the eternal, which alone is unaffected by the end times tendencies of dissolution and collapse. This is what survival is all about. It means disassociating yourself from the world and centering your mind in the truth and reality of God. There is a doom and gloom aspect to the end times. How could there not be? But in fact these times offer tremendous opportunity, which is why I would guess so many souls have opted to be born now. Precisely because you have to go against the flow, you can make much greater spiritual progress than at a time when outer conditions helped you and more or less took you along with them. What you achieve now is truly yours instead of being achieved for you. That having been said, how many people are actually taking advantage of the opportunity available? It seems not many. Every aspect of life is corrupted, the ostensibly spiritual as much if not more than any other. This new book aims to help those open to the idea identify end times tendencies and then resist them. That is what is needed for survival. Evil is a subtype of entropy, in this pluralistic animistic divine creation. Bruce Charlton. I have often written about the twin ultimate problems, ineradicable insufficiencies, of this, our mortal life, under the headings of entropy and evil. My understanding of reality is that its fundamental divisions or units are eternal beings, i.e. living beings, such that, to modify the title of William James's book, This is an Pluralistic Animistic Universe, i.e. there are many fundamental entities, not one, and these fundamental entities are alive, purposive, with agency and other attributes of beings. Because things began with many beings, God's divine creation, that we inhabit, is the primary source of cohesion. In a crude sense, by creation God imposed harmony on pre-existing and originally autonomous beings. For creation to be sustained, insofar as it is sustained, there must be harmony/cooperation/cohesion etc. between the purposes and motives of the many beings which constitute creation. Otherwise, divine creation will tend to fall apart, with different beings pursuing different goals, or living by different values. It is this tendency for divine creation to fall apart into a chaos of competing directions and behaviors that is the essential cause of the tendency named entropy, i.e. the tendency of all life, order, organization, forms, functionality etc. to decline towards chaos, with time. The primary source of entropy is therefore the disharmony of beings. Therefore we need to stop thinking of entropy abstractly, as if it was a branch of physics, as if it was some kind of force, or anti-force, that broke up stuff. Instead, we should think of entropy as a consequence of the fact that the beings of divine creation are imperfectly aligned in their nature and purposes. Our situation is that we may find ourselves loving God and experiencing profound desiring to live in harmony with divine creation, but we simply cannot do this in reality as we experience it, in this mortal life, because of our innate nature, because of the way we are, and have been, eternally. We may want to live in harmony with divine creation, but we cannot. But not all beings want to live in harmony with divine creation, and some beings hate God, and these are beings that have chosen, or, at least, are currently choosing, evil. So, evil can be defined as a kind of chosen entropy, when the inevitable disharmony between ourselves and divine creation is made into the positive choice ourselves to oppose divine creation. From this perspective we can see that evil is a type of entropy, in a sense a worse type of entropy, a positive decision to pursue negative outcomes. And worse than non-evil entropy, because entropy is universal and unavoidable, whereas evil makes the personal choice to oppose divine harmony. Motives for evil are various, but perhaps some kind of resentment or grudge against God, and the imposed aspect of divine creation, might be the most basic motivation. Aims of evil, too, are various. Perhaps the aim is to exploit divine harmony in pursuit of personal gratification or other selfish benefit, perhaps, more extremely, to oppose divine harmony simply from a desire to see it destroyed, taking spiteful pleasure in the destruction. This was the unavoidable human condition, blighted by ineradicable entropy, and worsened by chosen evil, and the situation for all beings, until the advent of Jesus Christ. Jesus was a mortal being, incarnated into this world of imperfect harmony between beings, but Jesus himself loved God wholly, and was himself, at least, at the time of his ministry, after his baptism by John, wholly aligned with divine creation. Jesus was himself mortal, which is to say he was subject to entropy. And Jesus was subject also to evil. However, because Jesus was perfectly aligned with God and creation, he knew that after death he could, and would, be remade as himself but perfectly, in other words, resurrected into eternal life, freed from entropy. Resurrection takes our aspiration to live wholly in harmony with divine creation, and rebuilds us from that basis. Furthermore, Jesus knew that if or when others had followed him into this eternal, because wholly aligned, entropy purged, state of resurrection, which remaking process would be guided by Jesus himself, then a world of such persons would be a world without evil. In eliminating entropy, resurrection also eliminates evil, as a subsidiary effect. And this wholly harmonious and wholly God-aligned post-mortal world would be heaven, in which the deepest and ineradicable problems of this mortal life are eliminated, and free and creative beings live spontaneously in harmony, loving God and each other, and from common aims and motives. The weakening effect of metaphysical mismatch, when you know something, but cannot explain it. Bruce Charlton. There are many situations in the modern world where people are in a situation that they know something, but cannot explain it. They cannot justify this knowing in terms of their underlying assumptions, their metaphysics. In such situations, their knowing is weakened to the point that it is usually overcome easily, and the person is unable to resist the corrupting effect of immediate and chronic societal and personal pressures. Such a mismatch between metaphysical assumptions and intuition is one of the most significantly malign factors in the world today. It therefore ought to lead to an examination of the assumptions, but it almost never does, for a variety of reasons. To clarify, I mean the situation when a thing is asserted or proposed, and initially we experience a clear and deep, and true, intuition that X is wrong. But then we find that our scheme of explanation fails to provide us with sufficient understanding of why or how X is wrong. And the consequence is that we assume that X must be okay after all. We go along with X, and maybe end by supporting X, if that is expedient. It works the other way around too, and with just as bad results. Someone or something that our hearts, at first, tell us is of great and profound positive value is challenged, is threatened. We would tend to defend this vehemently. But then we discover that our basic assumptions do not allow us to explain or grasp why this has such extreme importance. We realize that cannot justify its importance on the basis of fundamental metaphysics. A clear example is music, visual art and architecture. People may love some piece of music, greatly value a picture, building, landscape, or they may viscerally be morally revolted or aesthetically repelled, but they cannot find any fundamental reason why even such strong positive or negative feelings should be regarded as important. Lacking fundamental understanding, therefore our defense is enfeebled, at best, and often we are crippled from defending that we value, even to ourselves. The threatened good thing is allowed to disappear without dissent, without resistance, without a fight. Modern man was thoroughly set up for this situation by mainstream modern atheistic materialism, which inculcated the idea that metaphysics, the examination of fundamental assumptions, was meaningless nonsense. Instead, our beliefs ought to be based on evidence and pragmatism, what is helpful and what works. This is a thoughtless, stupid or dishonest philosophical assertion, because what counts as valid or compelling evidence, what is regarded as helpful or working well, are concepts embedded in fundamental assumptions. And this should be evident when people with different metaphysical convictions argue. The same fact means something different to each, because interpreted differently. But such is the ignorance of, prejudice against, or incompetence at metaphysical reasoning, that such fundamental differences in assumptions are instead interpreted as moral differences, as in anyone who disagrees with me must do so because he is a fool, insane, or a bad person. Sometimes, especially in the past, such a mismatch did not matter too much, in the sense that people could recognize and defend goodness, and vice versa, despite the lack of metaphysical foundations. But, as C.S. Lewis said, what characterizes this current era is that things are coming to a point, or, more exactly, this has already happened. And one consequence is that metaphysical mismatches are now being exposed and probed as never before. And, by no coincidence, at just the time when we are less capable of metaphysical reasoning than ever before. This has fundamental Christian implications, implications which are generally denied, precisely because of our modern tendency to be ignorant of, or denigrate, or be unable to examine and analyze our fundamental assumptions. The most important of these is in relation to Jesus Christ, and why he is essential. In the past, justifying and explaining this did not seem so pressing, and the fact that classical theology cannot provide a clear and direct answer did not seem to matter, Christians were simply absorbed in the demanding and complex business of obeying their church and being a Christian, as defined by their particular church, to bother about metaphysics. Leave that to the experts. Consequently, yet astonishingly, the failure to explain metaphysically why Jesus is essential persisted through the Great Schism, the Reformation and the Mormon Restoration, and up to now. But to the modern mind, a failure to explain simply and clearly why Jesus is necessary means that Jesus is not necessary, is inessential, hence Jesus is seen as ultimately disposable. This is one deep reason why so many modern people see nothing distinctive or definitive about Christianity, and no essential difference between the major religions. Another, for Catholics, is related to Mary, Mother of Jesus. In many times and places of the past, and especially medieval England, Mary was venerated at the core of Christian practice, but not of Christian theology. Yet, in the past the inessential nature of Mary to theology, demonstrably comfortably coexisted with her centrality to devotional practice. But nowadays this just will not work. Nowadays it seems clear that if Mary is fundamentally inessential to theology, then this means she is optional, which boils down to Mary being no more than a personal lifestyle preference. Quite a change and come down from the last days of Constantinople, when Mary united Eastern and Western Christians, and was the motivation for thousands of men courageously to fight to the death in defense of the city. With Mary, I mention a Catholic example, because intellectual Catholics are so devoted to logic. But there are innumerable other examples. The point is that there are many and vital instances where our intuitive knowledge is contradicted by our fundamental metaphysical assumptions, when we know but cannot explain. I regard it as imperative that we, each of us as individuals, are able to support our fundamental heartfelt convictions with deep metaphysical reasoning. This is a must because without the underpinning of a fundamental understanding and ability to explain to ourselves, all our convictions are built upon sand, and shall be swept away by the next flood of establishment propaganda and public pressure or immediate expediency, as became all too obvious in 2020. And unless these mismatches are sorted out, by discovering and analyzing the validity of our assumptions, and bringing intuition into harmony with metaphysics, then we shall continue fatally to be enfeebled, and controlled by malign powers. Functionality is taxed, parasites are subsidized and enforced. Bruce Charlton. Functionality is taxed, parasites are subsidized and enforced. There, in a nutshell, is the reason why the globalist totalitarian project has already collapsed, because this is happening in all social institutions, and the effect is synergistic. There is now no way out, because there are more parasites than functional people or groups. The parasites have wealth, power, and influence. Of course, when the functionality has become so weak, impoverished and rare, the functional offer slim pickings for parasites. The parasites have turned upon each other, which is why the world is suddenly, in just a few years, full of rumors of war, preparations for war, and ever more actual wars, all of which are escalating and spreading, on purpose, strategically, albeit invisibly to the masses. The globalist totalitarians, with their shrinking time horizons, see war as a last-ditch justification and possibility for achieving total control of all functionality in context of actual, or perceived, total war. They don't realize, or suppress the knowledge, that channeling all functionality into war is itself intrinsically destructive in an absolute sense of consuming and annihilating resources, people, effort. In the past, such profound destruction was somewhat mitigated if the war was genuinely well motivated among participants having truly positive motivations, perhaps of a religious or patriotic nature, in a world where groups were rooted in a family feeling that was itself positive. But that is not the case for the dominant world civilization as of now. Its people are not so much motivated as bribed, coerced, deceived, and manipulated by negative motivations such as fear, resentment, and spitefulness, and they know it. And, often, celebrate it. Good does not come from evil, and evil can only be turned to good by those who are motivated by good, and none of the actually existing grouping of Western humanity with wealth/power/influence are good. No, not even your church, which is actually part of the problem, as you know deep down, even when you have hope that it may cease to be so. Even when your core hope is that your church's goodness may enable it to be rebuilt from the relatively powerless micro-minority of those you regard as honest, correctly aligned and good-motivated persons. Social functionality is not, and never has been, spontaneous. When it happens, it is a secondary consequence, more powerful motivators, all of which have been eroded to near extinction. Functionality therefore cannot be attained as a primary goal. It arises, if at all, consequent upon some more profound and general motivation of a positive kind. And that is what is required, starting with me and you, because we are not going to find it waiting to be taken off the peg from anyone, or anywhere else. I don't have time to read books, or, if people really want to do something, they do it, or, the problem is wanting. Bruce Charlton. As a teen and young adult, I wanted to read books, especially fiction, especially novels, so I did. I read a lot of books even when I was very busy doing other stuff, for example studying at school or college, even when I was working as a doctor, even when I was a house officer/intern, even when doing the 80-hour shift at weekends. My point is that I wanted to read novels, so I made time to read novels. I don't claim any credit for this, I was simply indulging my personal preference. Other people have other preferences. But people who claim not to read books because they don't have time, are actually saying they don't much want to read novels, they would rather do something else. This applies across society. People are able to do what they really want to do, and if they don't much want to do something, then they are easily put off doing it. Modern people do not go to church, meet and participate in groups, don't do hobbies like they used to, don't play sports, seldom dance, act or make music, and so on. Yet people did all of these things and more, somehow but avidly, as best they could, in the middle 20th century, despite living under the oppressive and invasive conditions of communist dictatorships. They don't do them because in general they don't sufficiently want to do them, but want to do other things instead. Busy people nowadays make time, and spend money, to go to the hairdressers for elaborate interventions, get tattooed, go to the gym, go jogging, and interact on social media. That is what sufficient numbers of people want to do, and they do it. The problem is in the wanting. When people's wanting is socially influenced, it is, substantially, externally controlled, and when that external control is, overall, malign, then people want to do bad stuff, or at least suboptimal stuff, and they don't much want to do good stuff, so they don't do it. The effort, time, and money is channeled into doing stuff they want, and that wanting is externally motivated. What is futile, is to complain/demand that external influences are not making me want better things. Do we, here and now, seriously expect society to want us to do stuff that is good for us? Do we seriously hope that in the 21st century in the West, external influences will start encouraging purposive, meaningful, positive, creative, loving activities? If we expect a better society as the starting point for better lives, if we intend to reform social institutions such that they will begin to influence people for good, then we will wait a long time, and wait in vain. But if we want better, then we, as individuals, will first need to detach our own wanting from external influences. We shall need to discover what we ourselves actually want from life, and encourage others to do the same. Unobedience, what Christianity needs most. Francis Berger. William Arkell offers a lucid interpretation of God commanding Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, which I first encountered via Bruce Charlton's Arkell-focused blog. Quote, "When Abraham passed his test over his son's killing, to my mind he only got 60% for obedience. If he had said to God, 'This is not like you, I won't do it,' he would have got 100% for unobedience. What arises from this conflict is unobedience, which is a condition beyond the relatively automatic stages of disobedience or obedience, and has become autonomous and calculated and chosen." Dr. Charlton adds the following. Arkell explains that unobedience to God arises from the black and white of disobedience and obedience being in conflict. In other words, what God most wanted was not that Abraham would obey, or disobey, a specific instruction that he regarded as coming from God, but that Abraham would instead recognize that the real and proper question was at an altogether larger and more general scale. Neither disobedience nor obedience was required, but unobedience. End quote. For me, the above addresses the inherent limits of the free will doctrine and free will choosing, indicating that the exercise of true agency and freedom often extends beyond selecting from options to obey or disobey, particularly in circumstances when neither obedience nor disobedience are optimal. Instead of agonizing over whether to sacrifice his son, Abraham should have realized that God's apparent command was inconsistent with God's goodness. Rather than obey or disobey the command, Abraham should have understood that a benevolent God would not burden him with such a monstrous and murderous request and should instead have unobeyed the command by questioning God's motives and pressing for an explanation. Disobeying God at every turn is unquestionably sinful and self-destructive. However, resolute, unquestioning obedience to God via external avenues of authority or insistence upon one's own finite limitations are also self-destructive in the sense that it diminishes the self to the level of an unthinking, impersonal, uncreative, automatic, and largely passive automaton. Thus, obedience cannot be the highest ideal or virtue to which a Christian can or should aspire, particularly if such obedience stems from a fear of God's power. Christianity is, or should be, a religion of self-realization, not self-negation and self-destruction. A big part of that self-realization involves knowing and loving God and working in harmony with His creation through love. It is only through that we can build up or uncover the sort of self needed to affirm Jesus' second creation and accept His gift of everlasting life in heaven. As Dr. Charlton concludes, God's ultimate wish for us is that we should transcend obedience to become an unobedient participant, and eventual collaborator, in God's creative work.